Hello everyone. The title of my presentation is Running with Salmon, Life at the Limit of Extinction. The notion of limit, as I'm understanding it in my research, shares deep similarities with the one of extinction conceived by Van Dooren as a space of suffering but also of care. I will discuss these two notions in relation to an ongoing project, Running with Salmon, which suggests moving from responsibility towards an ethic of vulnerability and reciprocity. Now, more than 3 years ago, I was walking close to the River Dee in Scotland, where I live, and passed on a bridge. For the first time in my life, I saw salmon jumping against the current. It was beautiful, and I felt an opening in myself, which reminded me of when I was a child. In my view, that opening was a crack in the wall between myself and the rest of the world. I wanted to keep that crack opened, so I asked myself the question, what if I run with salmon? At the end of their life, salmon come back from the ocean. They find the river where they were born, and they run upstream to give birth and to die. Watching them made me think about my death and realize how I think of it as a wall that separates what is life from what is not. This could probably be a common understanding of death in our Western world. Therefore, I couldn't stop thinking to the inspiration salmon could bring us to us humans, and possibly show a different way of understanding death and life. As for many other animals, their precious way of life is now on the brink of extinction all over the world. Probably realizing my own mortality made me feel vulnerable, and rather than feeling responsible for their extinction, I felt my entanglement with them and an inner inclination to act. Understanding death as a wall resounds with the experience of marathon runners when coming towards the last kilometers of a marathon. Here, they might face the so-called wall of the marathon runner around the 35th kilometer and collapse before being able to come to the finish line. I am myself a marathon runner and have done research on the topic, and know that the wall of the marathoner is an experience of the unknown, taking the individual into a no man's land to cross a desert and face emptiness. The wall is paradoxical. It tells the runner, if you want to arrive to the finish line, you don't have to think to the finish line. You have to run as if you would run forever. The experience of the wall reorients the attention of marathon runners from the finish line to the movement of running and the present moment, so that they stop facing it and rather they can run forever along it as it were an asymptote. Indeed, one of the ideas coming up from my research is that the limit, as the wall of the marathoner shows, rather than being a separating line, is a space with high educational potential, which allows one to become exposed, reorienting us to explore what Deleuze called a life, a pure stream of consciousness without a self. Environmental philosopher and anthropologist Tom Van Dooren, in a recent book titled Flightways, Life and Loss at the Edge of Extinction, conceives of extinction not as a singular event, which is conventionally understood as the death of the last individual, but as spaces where an entangled way of life is disrupted and disconnected. These spaces at the edge of extinction are spaces of suffering, death, and loss, and also, as he says, places of intense hope and dedicated care. As Van Dooren noted, much of the history of Western thought has utilized animals' understanding of death to construct a dualism between the human and the animal. In his opinion, this dualistic thinking at the core of human exceptionalism contributes to our inability to be affected by the incredible loss of the spirit of extinction, and so to mourn the ongoing death of species. I have seen a deep similarity between the notion of limit, as I understand it, and the one of extinction, highlighted by Van Dooren. They can both be conceived as spaces of suffering but also of care. They are about dissolution and transformation and imply the graduality of boiling water. These concepts have the potential for shedding new light onto what we mean by life and its relation to death. What is death if we conceive of life as unfinished? Salmon tell us that death is not a separating wall. While they move upstream to reach the place where they were born, they fast along the way, transforming their bodies before spawning. Just after that, they die and other animals eat them, or they decompose, adding nutrients to the stream. As David Abram notes, the salmon's death is an ethical lesson of reciprocity and continuity, rather than of separation. What if death is not anymore a separating wall? How would we conceive of life then? So, some time has passed after I saw Salmon from that bridge. In the meanwhile, I've done different things, although unstructured and not formalized within a coherent project. Thanks to this panel, I now recognize them as part of the same idea. First of all, running along the D has become for me an everyday practice. I've been also walking and camping many times along its length. I am in collaboration with local institutions like the Barnard Center and the River Dee Trust, which are taking care of the River Dee, in particularly now, after the flood happened in 2015. As a Feldenkrais teacher, I'm offering courses on animal movements. Since recently death has become my main focus of attention, I'm now working with academic institutions and organizations on end of life. And more generally, I'm in conversation with people on this. I am becoming aware that what I am doing is a kind of storytelling. Indeed, I am creating biographical entanglement between humans and salmon by collecting their respective stories of death and extinction and bringing them into conversation through running. Running is in fact looking for what Gregory Bateson called the pattern that connects. It actually gives me the space to imagine how those two different patterns might connect. Running with salmon is to join with their movement and follow their dreaming migration to the source. This would ideally materialize a place of imagination and dreaming, like the Aboriginal songlines in the northeast of Scotland. To give a sense of how running with salmon is unfolding, I will now show a video that I made together with Ariel, my daughter. I used this video in a recent conference for Libera Uscita, an Italian association on right to die with dignity, as the starting point for opening a different perspective on death from the point of view of the anthropology of the more than human. After the video, I will draw some conclusions. Hey, look! A salmon!
But Dad, that fish goes against the current. It goes upstream.
Yes, salmon, after being in the ocean for a long time, come back to where they were born.
I'm still sad for Grandpa. And you?
Yes, me too. I don't know if it was a good death. This is what saddens me the most. I'm not sure we were able to be as close to him as I wanted.
Yes, I'm not sure too. I would have preferred it to be with us or at his home with Granny and Bob, his big dog, to keep him company, instead of being at the hospital.
Maybe. But how did we do it? We had to give him all the necessary treatments, and only doctors know them. And moreover, he was safer in the hospital. He could have lived longer.
Yes, but I haven't seen him again. And what did he really want?
Come on, let's not think about it. And don't ask these questions. Hey, look! Another salmon. Look at how it jumps. Looks happy. And what strength he has.
But why are they coming back?
They come back because they come to give birth to their little ones, where they themselves were born. Nobody knows how they manage to orient themselves after the long journey they have made. Nobody knows how they are able to come back home.
Maybe even Grandpa had to come home like Salmon. But what do salmon do after giving birth to their children?
They die.
But this is strange. The salmon make a very long journey, which then brings them back home. They die where they were born. So, have they not achieved anything in their lives?
What are you saying? Don't get me confused. They have gone very far, and most importantly, salmon are not like us. They are animals. They are not human beings. We are different. Come on again. Don't ask nonsense questions. Anyway, you're right. Salmon are a mystery. Think that when they return, they are transformed. Their body changes. They get stronger. And they don't eat for the whole time of the ascent.
Dad, but then this is similar to what you told me once about those inhabitants of India, about what religion, that I don't remember, who don't eat before they die.
Yes, that's right. I hadn't thought about it. Think that now those people can be put in prison because the law has judged that gesture as a suicide.
Sorry, Dad. But then, do salmon also commit suicide?
It is probably difficult to think to running with salmon as a project with clear objectives and duration. As my friend Deborah Pinninger told me once, maybe we should stop thinking in terms of projects. Thanks to art anthropologist Jan van Beukel, I came to know the notion of beautiful action by Norwegian environmental philosopher Arne Næss. To act beautifully means not starting from an external moral duty, but rather following one's own inclination, which according to Næss should already be laden with ethical value towards the environment of which we are part. This action should leave inspiration. As I said earlier, when I saw salmon from the bridge, I felt an opening in myself and started thinking to my own death in relation to salmon's way of dying. Suddenly, I realized my mortality, felt vulnerable, and moved to action. Similar feelings are experienced by the people with whom I am exploring this path. It seems that addressing the limit of death and the one between us humans and salmon can produce an existential turn. From the standpoint of the vulnerable, as David Abram suggests, one discovers to be part of the world and not anymore separated from it. From one's own mortality, it is then finally possible to be affected by the loss of this period of extinctions. Therefore, Running with Salmon suggests that we don't rely on moral responsibility and willpower to address issues of extinction, but rather that this could produce an experience of the limit which existentially would touch ourselves. This would hopefully reorient our life, forcing us to reimagine the way in which we live it in search of an ethic of vulnerability and reciprocity. Indeed, what is the relation between human individual death and salmon extinction? Thank you.